Now, as many of you will know, it's not easy to access good, reliable information about natural health issues. We recognise this as well, and so for some years now, Dr. Rath has been publishing open letters in prominent international newspapers. This one is the first one that was published in the New York Times, and it urged President George Bush to make health, not war. Cover a variety of themes in these open letters: natural medicine issues, the illegality of the war in Iraq, the threat that nuclear weapons and wars of aggression pose to the survival of mankind, and of course, the pharma industry's business with disease. We publish these open letters in newspapers all around the world. Here's an example of one that was published a few years ago in the South China Morning Post. It describes how vitamin C is a useful agent against all infections, and it was published, of course, at the time of the SARS scare. SARS, as some of you may remember, was the infection that was supposedly going to kill thousands, perhaps even millions of us. It was a serious threat to our lives. But of course, as quickly as it arrived on our front pages, it disappeared again, to be replaced with the bird flu threat, which is the latest scare thrown at us. We also engage in publicising issues to do with the war on terror. And of course, the war that all of us fear, that none of us want the war on terror to escalate into, of course, is nuclear war. Which is a good way to link to our Stop Nuclear War campaign. A campaign that really needs no explanation. The title of the campaign says it all. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I can't imagine that anyone would disagree with the idea that the war on terror has been an unmitigated disaster. A disaster for the 600,000 people, innocent men, women and children who've lost their lives in Iraq thus far. And a disaster for international relations. A disaster for the way in which our so-called political leaders are now viewed around the world. The hypocrisy of forcing other countries at the point of a gun to relinquish their nuclear weapons or their development of nuclear weapons, whilst at the same time our countries are armed to the teeth. And at the same time, of course, considering upgrading and updating our own Trident nuclear missiles. So when you leave this building later this evening, ladies and gentlemen, if you were to support nothing else that we do, we would urge you to support this campaign. Which brings me on to the campaign for equality for natural therapies, which is the latest campaign. Of course, brought to a head by the issue of the British Medical Journal and its accusations that it threw at Dr. Rath in such a spectacular fashion. Natural health, of course, is largely ignored in our medical journals, and there's perhaps no better example of this than the British Medical Journal itself, which, as the Financial Times announced only a few days ago, makes its money largely from pharma industry advertising. In other words, this is an issue that the pharmaceutical industry cannot escape from, the British Medical Journal cannot escape from. In any other language, it's called the conflict of interest. As you see there, the other quote on this screen is from Richard Smith, a man who edited the British Medical Journal for 25 years, a quarter of a century. And he said, as you can see, medical journals are an extension of the marketing arm of pharmaceutical companies. Well, he should know. And just to clarify this statement, this is not a statement that I extracted and quoted out of context from an article. This was actually the title of an article that Richard Smith wrote to illustrate his concern regarding this issue. The issue is, ladies and gentlemen, that natural therapies do not have equal status in our medical journals, especially including the British Medical Journal. The issue relates to a conflict of interest, and we believe it's time that these interests were exposed. From time to time, we get GPs coming to us and saying, surely, if these natural therapies were as effective as you say they are, wouldn't I be reading about them in the British Medical Journal? Well, now perhaps you understand why. Or why not, more to the point. So we're launching this campaign this evening, ladies and gentlemen, to try to make the British Medical Journal see sense. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, the man you've come to hear this evening is possessed of a quality that's increasingly rare in this world of ours. He's possessed of the ability to step outside of conventional wisdom and to think for himself. This naturally brings him into conflict with those of a different persuasion who may feel that the status quo that they're protecting is at threat. In his case, however, there are no vested interests, simply a strong desire for fairness, for truth, and a better world where good health, peace and social justice are available to all. Please give him a warm welcome, Dr. Matthias Rath.